Tonight, our expert and guest speaker is Frank DeLosReyes. Frank is the Associate Director of Global Diversity and Inclusion and Culture at Merck & Co. Incorporated, a leading global biopharmaceutical company. In this role, he leads Merck's D&I programs, helping the company challenge their strategies and policies to consider all voices and perspectives. This role is a culmination of 17 years of international experience in talent acquisition, HR operations, business process design, and improvement. In the last 15 years, he has held several positions in Merck, including global staffing process and change management lead, global recruiting and staff process lead, and HR operations process and compliance lead. In addition to all that, he's the board member for the Center for Workplace Compliance in Washington, D.C., a board member for the Northeast Regional Chapter of the Industry Liaison Group, and an active private sector representative at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the Labor Relations Committee. Before joining Merck in 2006, he served as the Director of Talent Acquisition at Day & Zimmerman. And he holds a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from Temple University and is a proud alumnus and past chaplain of our Pennsylvania New Chapter. Today, Frank will be discussing how policy and legislation influences his work, how he has to ensure that these rules align with the mission of his organization, and ultimately how he gathers the right buy-in internally and externally to sustain these new standards and ensure that he's providing the right balance of risk mitigation to stakeholders and the organization while also meeting the evolving needs of his employees. Frank, the next 30 minutes are yours to share insight and advice for our chaplains, and we'll have the last 10 minutes of those be open to question and answer.
Yeah, wow, wonderful. Thank you so much, Brandon. Thank you to everybody. I just want to just start by saying, thank you to Brendan and Thomas Chow for first, inviting me to this event to be able to engage with you all. I'm extremely humbled. I have no doubt that you probably have a long list of alum that would be willing to do this. And so my goal for tonight, Brendan, you really kind of painted this really great picture. Hopefully I can deliver. Hopefully I can give you all something, a little nugget of value to help you in the work that you're doing in your role as chaplain or standards committees, or potentially even as you start to explore your career opportunities in the future or career aspirations. So again, a little bit about myself. I'll start by, first, what I'm going to cover with you today as part of my story is to make some connections for you in terms of how the work that you all do as chaplain actually connects, how that work is actually very transferable to the public, private sector employers, NGOs, or academia. I think the responsibility, if we think about an organization like SIGEP or an organization in general, an organization has, I think, a couple key critical areas of focus. One, it's growth of either from a financial perspective or growth from a talent perspective. And so when we think about growth from a talent perspective, it's all about the recruitment of talent, the development of that talent, supporting the organization in alignment with the mission, values, and vision. And so I'll speak a little bit about that once I get into the presentation. In essence, I think it's important to understand that an organization's mission, values, and vision actually are foundational as you think about your policies and practices as a fraternity, right? The culture that you're trying to create, the voice or the perspective that you're trying to, or behaviors actually that you're trying to impart on your members, what's allowable, what's not allowable. Your mission, values, and vision actually are pretty foundational and critical to that. So I'll try to make that connection as well for you all today. So a little bit about my story and background. Hopefully this isn't too busy of a slide, but I'll start by just sharing real quickly in the top right-hand corner. That is the colors of the country I was born in. I'm a first-generation immigrant. I was born in Colombia. I came to the United States, and I'll share a little bit about my life experiences in the next slide. But I actually graduated, I think, like Brendan shared, with a poli-sci or political science degree, Bachelor of Arts, back in 1998. I can't even believe that I'm saying that because it seems like such a long time ago. But I can imagine where you're sitting, you're probably thinking, wow, it may be some time before you graduate, and your career path, 20 plus years, seems so far away. But I will tell you, it goes by a lot faster than you might expect. I joined Sigma Phi Epsilon fraternity, PMU chapter in 1995, because I was really looking for a sense of belonging, a sense of camaraderie, to really become part of a group of men who shared similar values as my own. I think little did I know that it would actually provide me with lifelong lasting friendships that I still hold dear today. And I think some really critical foundational skills that I gained in the fraternity. So Brendan mentioned I currently work for Merck Pharmaceuticals. I've been with Merck for this year is my 15th year. I can't believe I get to say that either. Merck is a leading biopharmaceutical company focused on inventing vaccines and medicines to help patients, both human and animals, live longer and healthier lives. You'll probably hear me reference that because that's really critical to what we do. That is our mission statement. That is our focus as an organization. As part of the company, I'm a part of the HR organization, and I sit in the global diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity, and culture area for the enterprise. And like Brendan shared, I'm also part of the Center for Workplace Compliance as a board member in Washington, D.C., the Northeast Regional Chapter Industry Liaison Group Board, and an active member of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Labor Committee. And in essence, what I do with those three organizations, part of my responsibility with the company is to be able to track and understand what are the legislative regulatory changes that are coming from a federal, from a state, from a local level as it relates to employment law and regulations. I will state I am not an attorney. I don't have a law degree. But in the work that I do in compliance, if you will, in human resource compliance, I engage very heavily with our internal labor or employment legal team, as well as outside legal counsel and other partner companies in the Fortune 500 as we try to understand the regulations and the impact on the organization. So I'm going to just quickly pause there for a second to say, hopefully some of what I'm sharing resonates with you. So as you think about the policies and the practices and training that you guys all develop in your roles as chaplain or as in your roles of standards committee, some of that resonates for you in terms of how do you go about understanding, synthesizing, and then operationalizing regulations for your chapters, right? And really simply helping your members understand what are those behaviors that are acceptable and not acceptable. Brendan, if we could, we'll go to the next slide, please. Great. So this is, before we get into the work I do, I thought I would share with you a little bit, which I think I started to do in the prior slide. So I was born in Barranquilla, Colombia, which is a coastal town in Colombia. I came to the United States at a really young age. When my family arrived in this country, we were actually extremely poor. We grew up in a section of Philadelphia called Hunting Park. It was not a great section of the city, but like many immigrants that came before us or that were part of that migration historically in the past, we grew up extremely poor. I'm sharing with you that at around 8 years old, I had I think a life-altering experience based on what my life experience was. And I recognize that everybody has different life experiences. But I don't think I understood how that would actually shape or influence, the work that I get to do today. At around 8 years old, my mom sent me to the corner store, or what we call the bodega, right, to go buy a gallon of milk. And she sent me to that store to buy the gallon of milk, not with dollars or currency. She sent me with, at the time, it was called food stamps. And so food stamps kind of mimic U.S. currency. There were denominations of 1, 5, 10, and 20. And anybody at the time who was under public assistance actually leveraged that to buy food. I remember the sense of embarrassment and shame that I felt when I had to go to buy that gallon of milk at 8 years old with the food stamps. And at that point, I remember thinking to myself, I don't know what the other side of this coin is that I'm experiencing, but I know that whatever it is, it's got to be better than this. And whatever it is I need to do to get out of this situation, I have to do to get out of the situation. In my family, the matriarch of my family was my Aunt Margarita, or what we call her, my tia. She basically brought with her five other adults. And in essence, she was a housekeeper. She would actually catch 3 buses every day to go clean houses for a living, to make sure that all the kids actually, followed a college career or college path because she knew that the only way out for us out of our socioeconomic position was with a college degree. And so I'm excited, I just thought I would share that with you because that's a part of my background. That's part of my story. That's a part of how the perspective I bring to the workplace and the work that I do. Brendan, if we could, next slide. Great. So as I think about that, I'll share with you, as I grew into adulthood, it's interesting how we carry things with us from a very young age, even into adulthood. I remember when I first came into corporate America over 20 plus years ago, I remember having that same sense of embarrassment about how I grew up, my life experiences, right? I didn't go to a prestigious college or school. I didn't come from a background with two parents in the same household, right? I didn't have any historical corporate America experience. And so really it was a challenge for me. I felt as though when I joined corporate America that I struggled to navigate the enterprise, right? I covered my accent so that as a defense mechanism, right, to try to fit in better. I focused, most of my efforts in building my skills and capabilities so that I could fit in more, that nobody would be able to say, you're only here because of your race, your gender, your ethnicity, whatever it might be. I wanted a seat at the table, and I wanted to make sure that I had the appropriate skills necessary to be at that table. The one thing I failed to do, and I'm just sharing this or imparting this on you all as you're exploring your future career aspirations, is the one thing I didn't realize to do because I didn't have any prior historical experience or familial historical experience in corporate America was I failed to create social enterprises and social networks within my workplace. Meaning I wasn't going out of my way to actually engage with others to build mentorship opportunities or social networks. I will share with you, I think it's critically important that as you join the corporate space or any organization that, in addition to focusing on your, the core skills and capabilities of the job that you're in, that you also have to focus equal amounts of time in building that social capital and social network. Because the decisions that are made in large organizations are derived based on both your, the work that you do, how well you do it, but also the social networks that you're able to build and maneuver. So, for me, I think it wasn't until I started to do work in the inclusion, diversity, belonging, equity, and culture space that I realized many years later that my past experiences, my life experiences weren't a detriment to me. They weren't a detriment or an Achilles heel, if you will, to the organizations I had joined. They were actually my superpower. They allowed me to see things through those experiences. They allowed me to bring forward a different perspective through those experiences, and they allow me to do the work that I do today in diversity, equity, belonging, inclusion, and culture. Brendan, next slide, if you could. Great. So I think earlier I shared, I wanted to try to make the connection for you around mission, values, vision, and purpose. And so the first three, mission, values, vision, I would argue that for any organization, those are critical foundations to any organization. I would say purpose is really more about the individual and how the individual aligns to the organization and the work that they do day to day. When I think about mission, ideally, mission is intended to describe what the business an organization is in to do, right? What are they there to do? And what are they not there to do? I think so as you think about, as I share that, I would challenge you to think about the SIGET mission and what the intent there and what it's not intended to be or intended to do for its members. So when I think about Merck, again, we talk about, an organization that is in the business of developing or inventing vaccines and medicines to help our patients and customers, both human and animals, live stronger and better lives. When we think about values really describe the culture that you're trying to create. So for us at Merck, as an example, we have a high regard for our patients, respect for people, a high level of ethics and integrity, innovation, and scientific excellence. Without those critical components, we can't do the work that we do. And then vision statement, as an example, is really more of a future looking statement. Where does the organization, who does the organization want to be in the future? And what does it want to do as that organization? When I think about the journey that we've been on at Merck, it really was, I remember several years ago, probably 8 or 10 years ago, we started to talk about being a leading oncology organization focused on cancer research. And we ended up becoming that, right? Because that was our vision at the time, 8 or 10 years ago. That's where we wanted to go, and that's what we wanted to do and be. So purpose. Again, I'll share with you in the next few slides. Purpose is really about where or the work that the individual does. How does it align to that mission? How do they find purpose in the work they're doing, and intersection to mission, value, and vision? Brendan, next slide, if you could. So, I realize this slide's a little busy. This slide's really going to kind of give you, I think, a little more insight into my background. On the left-hand side, it's really what I've been focused on for the last 23 years in my career, and that incorporates human resources. I'm doing a lot of work these days in concepts like growth mindset and psychological safety. Compliance has been a critical part of the work that I do, along with culture and inclusion, diversity, equity, belonging, and culture. On the right-hand side, you see, obviously, I went to Temple University, BA in political science. I really the work I focus on really is at the intersection of people, helping to provide new experiences, right? Because we all have different experiences growing up, which drive our beliefs and lexicon. And then hopefully trying to give people new experiences, beliefs, and then at the same time, help them build their capabilities from a leadership and an individual perspective. When I think about my responsibility to the organization, similar to probably how you think about your role or responsibility as a chaplain, for me, when you're thinking about a private sector employer, we're a publicly traded company. And so one of my critical responsibilities is, how do I mitigate risk for the company, right? How do I stay on top of legislation and regulation? How do I inform the right people? How do we make the right changes for the organization to ensure that we're complying with all the laws at a federal, state, and local level? How do I ensure that I'm not going to negatively impact, based on a decision that we're making, our shareholders, right? We're a publicly traded company. Our shareholders are a critical stakeholder in the work that we do. And then I think finally, the employee. Being that I sit in the diversity and inclusion space, my focus is really centered around the employee, making sure that the employee experience is a positive experience, that the employees have what they need, and they're able to do the super critical work that we do at Merck. My motivation, I didn't share this in the other slide. I'm married. I've been married to my wife now for over 20 plus years. We met at Temple University. I have 2 daughters, both actually go to Temple University. My oldest hopefully will be graduating this semester, or have 1 class left the next semester. She's going for a degree in risk. She's at the Fox School of Business. My youngest is really just starting to explore the college experience. She hasn't figured out what her major is. And so we're trying to give her some time and space to figure that out. But, they're both really enjoying their time at Temple. So how do I think about, or how do we think about compliance as it relates to the work that we do? I would say in corporate America, or even as you should probably think about in the work that you do as an organization like Sigma Phi Epsilon, or academia, NGO, or the private sector. Well, first, it's critical that you're able to track and understand what are the regulations that are coming from upstream, right? What's happening, what's being adopted, what's being passed from a legislation and regulatory perspective. By creating a network, both internally and externally, you're then able to track that legislation and regulation, kind of staying aware of what's coming down the pike. You're then able to take that information and, through that same network, interpret and understand the impact of those regulations to your organization, your employees, your processes, your practices, your policies. Right? I do that by engaging both with internal employment legal, and as well as outside legal counsel and other member organizations to try to interpret, how do we think this legislation or regulation is going to affect us. We then work to synthesize that information, meaning, now that we understand it, we absorb that information. And then what does that mean from an operational perspective? Is there something that we now have to do that is different from our current processes and practices? Are there systems that require changing? Are there policies that require creation or updating? And are there behavior changes that we need to help our employees and leaders better understand? As part of this process, we also think about the change management that's required with any change in an organization. We think about who does this impact? When is this going to impact them? What is the change that we're expecting? And why, right? We try to tell this story in a simple way as possible. So in the end, I think it's critical for you to think about, as you think about the policies that you're creating within your chapters or from a national perspective, it's thinking about drafting policy language in its simplest form. From a policy perspective, we have actually taken the approach that we try to create all of our policy language at a 5th or 6th grade level, which is kind of ironic because we have many employees that actually have PhDs or multiple PhDs. But we really try to create language that is extremely simple for the employee and leaders to understand. We also try to create training for both managers and employees to help them understand what it is we're trying to relay to them from a change perspective. And then finally, as part of this, is there an audit that is required as part of this regulation or legislative change? And then finally, what are those behavioral expectations, right? What are the behaviors that we see based on our mission, values, and vision? What are those behaviors that are acceptable in our organization? And what are those behaviors that are not acceptable? I think it's extremely critical that you're able to help people understand that. It might sound really basic, but it's difficult to hold people accountable if they don't understand what the behaviors are that are acceptable and not acceptable. Brendan, next slide, if you could. Great, thank you. So as I think about, and this is where purpose comes into play. So as I think about the work that I do at Merck, I won't go into the mission again. I think you probably have all heard me repeat it 2 or 3 times. But as a member of the HR organization, in essence, I'm responsible for helping to design and deliver the necessary programs that are aligned to the company's strategy, its mission, our values and vision. And these programs are intended to really drive change and accelerate comprehension of leaders, and to really help create a more diverse and inclusive workplace experience where we foster ideation and innovation. So for me, I have a lot of passion about the work that I get to do, because I know at the end of the day, what I'm doing is I'm creating a workplace that's better for all employees, regardless of your ethnic background, your racial makeup, your disability status, your gender identity, right? I'm creating a better workplace that allows the employees to focus on the great work that they need to do at hand, those employees for today, but also the employees of the future. Brendan, next slide, if you could. So this is really the last slide. I thought it would be a missed opportunity if I didn't share some pictures of my fraternity, or Sigma Phi Epsilon PA Mu chapter. In the bottom left, that was our paddle for my class. Top center or top left, that was our house in North Philadelphia. The center picture was, I think, one of our softball teams or one of our teams playing intramural sports. And then the right is one of my fraternity brothers, Isaac Carter, aka Pooh Bear, who's actually a chef in Boston. And kind of our staircase as we went up the steps with all of our paddles, class paddles laid out. And so I want to just say once again, thank you so much. I hope I gave you something of value today. I know I had about 15 minutes with some time at the end for Q&A, and I want to make sure that I give you all enough time for hopefully a rich Q&A conversation. I would love to connect with you via LinkedIn. You can find my name on this slide. Please feel free to connect with me. I'd love to be a connection for you, going forward.